Welcome to the Working Mama podcast, a show that provides real-world tips, tricks, and advice to all working mamas on how they can have a career, family, and hopefully one day break the glass ceiling. Well, hey there, Mama. Welcome back to another episode of the Working Mama podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about communities, and it's a topic that we often associate communities just, in a personal sense, maybe with like mothers groups and sporting events and the like. But then also from a business sense, there's also networks. So I really want to chat today with you about, some of the challenges that women are faced with in the workplace, and then why we all, really, the benefits of belonging to a community, and how they can help you. So humans are social beings. They really have a need to belong, and this is deeply ingrained in our nature. Even like hundreds of years ago, we lived in villages and communities, and we had that pack mentality that we'd move from one location into another. So it's a really big part of our being, and certainly as well during COVID, we learned that we really actually did want that interaction with people. And when we had social isolation, and trust me, we don't want to go back there, we didn't do well. So as much as we say, we don't want to really be around others, look, it's something that we also really, now realize that we really do. And we do have an innate human desire to connect with others and with each other. And we have a fundamental need for belonging. And in this, there's not only just that physical element, but it's also the psychological and also the emotional well-being elements of being part of a community. And we'll go into that a little bit more. Actually, before I forget, I've jumped straight into this episode without actually telling you that this episode is brought to you by the Working Mama Village. The doors are currently open, so they close on Friday the 21st of July. So jump on, have a look, Working Mama Village, and, love to have you in as a member. So getting back to today's podcast, just a small segue there. Also, as I said, communities really have that sense of belonging. They, really help us with our identity, our purpose, and also giving support. And as I said, we want to feel connected to others. And a big part of that as well is it helps with our confidence. And that we all know that when we return back into work after maternity leave, our confidence is pretty much rock bottom. We're questioning ourselves, can we do it in terms of the role? We're also navigating having a child and how are we going to, get them fed into childcare and looked after and make sure they're okay and the carers are okay. And then also the evenings, it's like, oh my goodness, I've got to do bed, bath and everything else in between. And it's, it is a struggle. I'm not going to lie. But the more that we can also normalize those struggles, the better off we're going to be. So rather than actually feeling, and I've had this so many times, particularly in the last 6 months of, well, isn't, who else is facing this? And as soon as I realized that, say, someone else is going through the same thing, I'm like, okay, I'm not so crazy. I'm actually completely normal by having these feelings. And by knowing someone else is actually going through a similar way, I'm like, well, that's not so bad then. And what was actually playing out in my head was actually then I flipped the narrative because I'm like, right, I'm not on my own. Others are going through the same thing and I'm not feeling so cray-cray. And I know generally when also we become a mum, definitely here in Australia, we are then invited to join a mother's group. I remember when I was, first going in and thinking about going into mother's group, my husband, word for word said, nah, look, shop's full. We don't have time for even our current friends. I don't think we're going to have, not enough time for, mother's group, and how are we going to fit that in and the like. It was more about me, and I'd heard so many things, positive things about being a part of a mother's group. So I went along to the first visit and the first group. We're all sitting in a circle, all with bubs. And it was funny because you're looking around at everyone, you're checking everyone out, right? Who looks like, who's who, and I wonder who's going to be the loud one, the quiet one, and, really overshares, because there's, some of those in every group. And so it was interesting. And so But as part of that mothers group, we all had to go around and introduce ourselves and our child's name and a little bit of our birthing story. And by doing that, there was a sense of vulnerability. So it put us all on the same page, all made us really feel like, yep, we've all been through the same journey of, or a similar journey of giving birth. And certainly there were some more traumatic stories compared to others. And yeah, so we're actually, feeling that, all right, we've got that relatability, we've got that connection. And still to this day, there's even one of my friends who I've made from Mothers Group has actually, she gave this story about, strengths and accepting help. And still to this day, if you've listened to many of podcasts of mine, I've actually still referred back into that example. And my husband now says how good Mothers Group was. And he even, to one of his brothers is like, yep, join Mothers Group. It's absolutely amazing. Karina's got so much out of it. And why? It's because it's been that emotional support. It's made me feel like a sense of community. When I've had those mornings or even those nights, particularly when my first son was born, it was just crazy. The first 6 months, you're just like, what's going on? And how's he feeding and sleeping? And everyone's checking in on every of each other. And certainly that's such a big part of those, the first few months of going, oh my goodness, am I doing this right? Am I the only one feeling this? By being a part of that community of mothers that are in that, in those early days, it actually normalized. And I have to say, it did actually keep me sane. Our group's a little bit smaller now, but we've still got that support, that connection that we know we only need to just message in a quick WhatsApp and the troops will be rallied. And it's really that strong sense of belonging and also that identity, and certainly as well our confidence, as particularly as going in mums. And I know definitely going from one child to two child, it was huge. So that initial part of, oh my goodness, is this actually for me? 100% that community as a new mum really helped me stay sane. And I think that's where as well, like there's so much value you can get. And it's also about normalizing it and, that positive impact of community on mental health, on our well-being and also then on our overall satisfaction. I know that and even before I joined Mothers Group, the way I was probably parenting, some of the awareness of different things, I wasn't necessarily all there just because of just becoming a new mum as well. Lack of sleep, we all know it. I need to go into it. And then once I'd found this community, it was almost like this weight had been lifted. I was like, oh, right, okay. As I keep saying, I'm not so cray-cray, but also B, normalizing the struggles, the challenges, but also the good times as well. And certainly there is correlation between community involvement and also improved outcomes in different areas of our life. But then also now relating to this as a working mum, being a working mum can also be really isolating. I remember but when I returned back into work from my first maternity leave and even my second, I'm going back into teams where A, they've either already had kids and they're a lot older, or B, they've never actually had kids. I've also worked generally in a male-dominated environment. So as we all know, when father's returning from leave, which is very, very rare, or even, they're 2 weeks leave at the start and then they're right back into full-time work. It's a different transition compared to a mother. So therefore, when you're returning back into work after mat leave, you rock up that first day and you're like, right, okay. And people just assume that you're going to be the same person. Deep down, your mind is not really necessarily there. You're on going, oh, I wonder how Bubs is going with the person that's caring for them, generally with childcare. And I wonder if they're sleeping and eating and taking the bottle and everything else that goes with it. So you're emotionally not really there. And it can be quite isolating because I know when I returned back into work, I was like, I had to ask a friend of mine who was in HR and I went up to her and said, where do we pump? And I felt like there was almost this real quiet little group of women that have returned back in. Because I was like, I need to pump. Where am I supposed to pump? And she's like, oh, look, the first aid room downstairs. I was like, okay. Then I ran into someone that also just recently returned. And we hadn't really, we knew of each other, but it's not like we'd caught up for lunch or anything. But as soon as we both knew that we were mums and new mums returning back into work, we were then sharing war stories of what it was like, lack of sleep or pumping. navigating the juggle. And it was in those few connections that I had in my workplace, it made such a difference, because I was like, oh, wow, it's not just me feeling this. Yep, they're going through it as well. They're working, 3 days a week, the same as me. And it actually made me feel a lot better to know, oh, okay, I've made these choices and I'm not alone in making these choices, particularly going back to 3 days a week when I was working. And rather than the whole, you should feel this way, it actually normalized to go, well, the way that you're feeling is completely normal and it's okay. And just by someone actually saying, it's okay, it's normal, I'm feeling the same, it's amazing just when you're going, oh, this weight comes off your shoulder, and it's awesome. And so, as working mums, and particularly in that return back into work, we are breaking down many, many barriers. And often in workplaces, as I said, I work in a very male-dominated environment. And so, men don't necessarily understand what it's like. And so it's also about educating it, but also for yourself, of finding those communities to help normalize it. There's a number of organizations do sometimes have female networking communities, so you can also then find that. But that's also a key reason why I've created the Working Mama Village, is so as you're returning back into work, and even in those first few years, you're going, oh, what am I doing? How do I normalize this? Lack of sleep. I'm trying to do this. And you're like, oh, you can easily do a post in the Facebook group. How am I going to do this? And trust me, there will be people that will come in and normalize it, back you, and you'll be there to help you support it through. Another element is that, women really in our mothers or even our grandmother's generation, depending on how old you are, they had to give up work when they got married. And so now, pretty much we get married and we're like, right, what's our next step in our career? How can we keep elevating it up? So that's where this societal change and the stories and the narrative that was around, we're also debunking some of those myths. And so that's where, that value of community to help normalize. And I'd say a lot about being a working mum is certainly normalizing it. I leave work around 4:30 because I've got to, do the childcare pick up and the like. And it's what I've got to do. But people now know that that's why I'm leaving, and I'm not, hopefully for those around me, normalizing what I need to do. And certainly as well that there is positive research that shows the psychological and emotional support of being a part of a community, shows that it also improved self-confidence, particularly around career advice and also with working mums as well. Now, probably another question comes into it of, if you're a working mum, why should you be part of a community? And I would say that, some of the challenges that we have that are quite unique, and yes, there's a plethora of business networking groups out there, and they're certainly as well very unique. They might be on a particular topic, and look, I belong to a number of communities myself, particularly paid communities, and I go there for a particular reason. So there's one group called One Roof. I belong to that more from an entrepreneurial perspective, and it certainly helps with the connections and the collaborations for working mama. But if I put my corporate hat on, it's a different style of networking if I'm wanting to build my network in that industry that I work in. But from a mum perspective, that's why it's a key reason that I started the Working Mama Village, is to normalise and to support women, in those early phases as you're creating and laying those foundations as a new mum navigating it. And so if you don't have that support in your workplace, that you can go, right, there is a community that's got my back, that understands what it's like, and that's there to help and support you. So some elements that just to consider about if you're considering a community or joining a network as well. Here are some considerations to think about. And certainly as well, as I say, feel free at any point to reach out or to join the Working Mama Village. And this is very much about and these elements are around what I've aimed to create as well for the Working Mama Village. The first part is about emotional support. And so it's here about joining a network with like-minded individuals who understand your unique challenges and also experiences being faced by women in similar roles. So with the Working Mama Village, for example, it's targeting professional women generally probably middle to senior management. But if you're, regardless of what role you have, that's what it is. And so then if you're wanting to share emotions, seek advice, get the empathy and encouragement, by all means do it. I do it even as someone who's running the community and advocating for it. I go in and ask questions, seek advice. I've done it time and time again. And I have to say, it's been instrumental. I absolutely would, be lost without it. The networking opportunities is communities provide valuable networking opportunities for working mums, allowing them to connect with professionals, and this can help you lead to career advancements and collaborations and potentially even mentorship. So in the Working Mama Village, we do a monthly masterclass. There's I think over 15 different masterclass experts that have got, then are all available now on demand. So if you're like, oh my goodness, finances are going up, how am I going to manage? Yep, there's already a masterclass on family budgeting. What I'm going to do in terms of leadership, here we go. What I'm going to do in terms of career advice, yep, that's covered. What can I do about redefining my values and my why? Yep, that's covered. That was our very first masterclass. So it's really as well about the networking, but also then the professional development. And also here it's around the training programs. And often, our corporates are fantastic with, or very often they're very good, or even businesses, on learning and development. But these are very much around a job or a skill. So for example, it might be leadership and management, negotiation, all the normal skills. But I will actually challenge you to find out if your organisation is delivering training, say for example on the mental load, which is applicable to both men and women. Say maybe around work-life integration. Are they offering training around that? Are they doing training around maybe some of the soft skills as a working mum, and redefining your confidence and imposter syndrome and managing imposter syndrome? Are they giving training any of that? I know personally when I went into my learning and development site, I typed in mental load. I literally got nothing that came back out. And I work for quite a large organisation, 0 on the mental load. And I'm thinking the mental load is huge, not only at home from a gender diversity and equality and certainly have that conversation, but also then has ripples into the workplace. So if we're wanting to change, as I said, the gender diversity and reduce the gender pay gap, it certainly has a big part of the mental load. So that's where professional development, how it can support, and that's where communities can really help fill that gap around that professional development. And that's what we need as working mums, as confidence mindset to build us up so we can actually elevate our thinking. I've recently been speaking to a mindset coach because I was like, I need some help. And so I went and got my own professional development. I've actually done a podcast with her as well. And so it's really helped me, and it has leveled up my thinking, and it's also helped me with my confidence and in so many ways. So I didn't get this from work. There's no mindset training or support. But for me, I went and found it, and it's been amazing. So knowledge sharing is another really big part of being part of community. And it's also about our collective wisdom. What works for one person may also be applicable for another, and really sharing those wisdoms. There might be a few people maybe a little bit further along in their journeys that they can then circle in and say, this is what's worked for me. Here's my hot tip. Obviously, you've got to ask the question to be able to get that as well. Work-life integration, certainly about helping people manage this. So what works for them? I know in the past I've asked for meal planning ideas, recipes, different tips, say even for outsourcing and how it works. Also then shared resources, it could be what works for you, say maybe flexible work arrangements, productivity apps, different services and the like. So definitely if those sharing of resources and also knowledge. Advocacy and empowerment is huge. So definitely the empowerment of others, feeling empowered as well. So if you're standing up for, say, being a working mum, or around, say, maybe workplace flexibility or hybrid working, knowing that it's, say maybe normalized outside of your organization can also give you weight and confidence to actually fight for it and advocate for it as well. So you can actually say, well, this organization X is doing this. I've seen it. Okay. And it also helps you, bit of that, ammunition and those little back pocket tools and tips and tricks that help you along the way. And another part is also about lifelong friendships. I know certainly there's been some connections made in the Working Mama Village that have actually then kept going outside of that community, which is amazing. And so support systems and that sense of belonging. And certainly as well, just to round this off, this part is around self-care and wellness. And we know, as we all know, as working mums, we put so much time and effort into everyone else and not enough into actually ourselves. And so that's why, even men exercise more than females. And so here it's about, through community, you're actually helping, promoting physical, mental and emotional well-being, also reminding others to reprioritize their own health and well-being, alongside their professional and also parenting responsibilities. So, you know what, in terms of communities and network, men and women network and engage completely differently. I was at a conference recently and actually called this out when at the very last minute I was actually called up to be a panel member. And I called out to the audience because we're talking about gender diversity and how to attract more people into my industry. And I said, look, one of the ways is just men and women network differently. So it's also, there is the boys club, as much as we try and deny it, there is. But also then it's about creating those communities and those safe spaces for women to network. It's amazing as well. Like, women will not necessarily always come up to, even with men, start talking, but then men will have a little bit more confidence and women will. We probably want to get to know people, even each other, on a different level. And so it's really interesting that even when you go to your next conference, stand back and actually watch the crowd, and you'll see the men talking to the men and often the women talking to the women. Yeah, there is, gender diversity in that way, and there will be, with mixed groups. But it's interesting as well, just the conversations, the interactions, the networking style of questions, they're going to be different. And also another element of networking is also about helping your network act as your own personal advisory board. I know Ellen, who I've had on previously on the podcast, Ellen Hooper, and she's talked about this through her socials, but also as part of the research for this episode, I saw this referenced as well as your own personal advisory board. And so where you can lean on these communities or networks or even individuals if and when as you need. And so, like recently I was actually going for a job interview and I hadn't interviewed for about 13 years. And it was an internal role and I was really a bit nervous. I knew who was going to be interviewing me. I know them really well, but I still wanted to let them know, a little bit more about me than what they may know, because I've had a career before I've worked directly with them. So one of my first things I did was actually do a post in the Working Mama Village. Typed in, right, I'm going for a job interview. I haven't interviewed and it's an internal position. What are some tools and tips and tricks? I had so many responses that, I kid you not, it's what set me up for success for that interview. One of the tips was about not assuming people will know your knowledge, and certainly preparing well. And I did that, made sure I prepared, had my stories, absolutely everything. And so I nailed that job interview. Yes, I got the job. And I would put it down to what I got back in from the Working Mama Village. There was someone, a recruiter, also said to me, right, here's some tips. But the foundation of what I prepared for that interview largely came from the Working Mama Village, because they were, they are some, my personal advisory board. What about this? What about that? I've also got other key people that I lean on. But that's a big part of it. And I feel safe that I can ask those questions. And the responses I got back, as I said, they helped me get the job. I kid you not. And so, yeah, it's really making sure that you've got these opportunities for you to actually help you build up your network and really do this. And for some strategies for finding and engaging in communities, it's also about, what are their values, how much they align with you, but also looking at what is your need. Whereabouts are you on your journey? What are you needing to maybe help you elevate up to that next role? Is there a particular problem that you're wanting to do, or a particular, focus? Sometimes it can be coaching related.
Other times it might be purely networking. And also, what style is it? Are you wanting, there's a whole lot of, say, entrepreneurial female startup communities. There's so many of them. There's also then professional networks. There's networks for CEOs and the like, so there's so many different elements and networks that are around. Where I focus on for the Working Mama Village is around women re-entering the workforce after maternity leave in those first couple of years back in the workforce, because we all know that they're really challenging years. And so the aim through the Working Mama Village is that you feel supported, connected and empowered through the community engagement that can help you, feel confident returning back into work and navigating the juggle as a working mum. So that's why there's topics in there relating to for masterclasses for, mental load through to leadership, through to life admin and the like. So you name it, we've actually got a really good library that's developing there. But it's also about understanding what are your needs and what kind of community do you want to associate with. So at the moment, the Working Mum Village is largely online. I am very excited to announce that probably in August, I'll put out a meetup, particularly in Melbourne, and then I might do a meetup in November in Sydney. So yeah, that's just some things about, when you're looking for communities, you have a think about what you're looking for. Certainly, by all means, check out the Working Mama Village. I would love, 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 love for you to join. So yeah, look, that's what I just wanted to just quickly run through with you today, was just about the value of community. Sometimes we actually are so focused on what our kids need, even sporting clubs, and I'll join that, and what I need to do at work, without actually not reflecting on ourselves, and if we're experiencing things like mum guilt and, questioning and even doubting our own ability, can we do something? Often by actually surrounding ourselves with like-minded people, that you then can go, all right, yep, cool, they experience mum guilt, so do I. All right, I don't actually have to feel so bad about it now, because you know what, others are feeling it, and so I can then, you start to normalize that guilt. It's normal, it's okay. And so now I know so many people that are going, oh, look, the juggle's real with kids, and navigating it, and having flexible work schedules certainly helps. And so by me being able to see from what others are doing, it helps me normalize it. So it's also sometimes the narrative and the story that we're telling ourselves, and by surrounding us with, people that are like-minded, going through similar struggles, and but also want to have that goals and ambitions to also be a mum and also have a career. That's where Working Mama Village certainly helps. And so what I've talked about in terms of resources and friendships and professional development and networking opportunities, it's all there, part of the Working Mama Village. So, but as I said, there's heaps of communities out there. As I said, I'm a member of One Roof, and that's for me also an amazing space, particularly in that startup space. I belong to an industry association as well. So yeah, there's different things that you use, and I know a number of people that don't just belong to one network, but multiple, and you get something particularly from each network. So look, feel free. I'll provide the links in the show notes to join the Working Mama Village. If you've got any questions, just feel free to send me a DM on, say, LinkedIn or Instagram. I'm now on Threads, so I've been threading the last few days. So feel free to come over, have a chat. Love to connect with you. And those social platforms as well are another form of community engagement, and certainly a lot of people are a part of groups on Facebook, and Instagram is trying to be that community space, but also now Threads as well. So just it's all in the online space. So lots of different elements there. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode. As always, I would love if you could leave a rating or review. That would be amazing. I've got 18 reviews at the moment. I would love to get up to 50. So if you can help me achieve that goal by the end of the year, that would be absolutely amazing. Well, until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to the Working Mama podcast. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. Please also feel free to contact me on any of the Working Mama social channels. Remember, Mama is MUMMA, or website www.workingmama.com.au. I would appreciate you to share this podcast with friends and colleagues, especially those that are parents managing the juggle. And I would really appreciate if you had to take the time out to leave a review of the podcast. Thank you, and see you next time. Have a great week.